Hello, hello, hello. And welcome to the Astrology Channel. Now with a more casual episodes, just talking and hanging out. How are you, Kyle?
I'm just swell. How are you, Koji?
I'm hanging out. I'm pretty excited now that the video's there. It feels like we've been in this all goal zone for years now.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't think we're done. I feel like
Yes, that's definitely true. This is somewhat part of the video. It's like
yeah,
a what's it called? The director's commentary
yeah,
version.
yeah. It's kind of like the director's commentary. There's like 20 things that I planned on talking about with Algol in the video that I just didn't get around to or just didn't fit. Um, so now I can just regurgitate all that
Yeah,
out.
just get it all out there.
Yeah,
Nice.
um,
And I guess that's a good place to start. Like, what are those things that you didn't get to? And why didn't you get to them?
Well, I mean, I had like a lot of really cool examples. Charlize Theron was pretty awesome. She has Mars conjunct Algol. She has some controversy, like in her upbringing and background with apartheid and stuff, being a grew up a well-off white person in South Africa. But so some oppression, exploitation dynamics early on. Not that she's an active participant now per se, but then like a lot of her roles are pretty fantastic. She played this villainous queen person, and she actually injured herself. She's actually injured herself a bunch of times on sets, but she injured her throat from screaming so hard,
Oh, whoa.
which is very Taurus, Mars, yeah, I know it was more than examples.
I know
I
one thing that we didn't talk about, which is the whole Saturn Jupiter relationship with Algol. Time and time again, you see it in Ptolemy, where he'll
Mm,
have a fixed star, and he says, so and so fixed star is of the nature of this planet and that planet. And that's something that we totally did overlook in our video. And Ptolemy says that, of course, Algol is related to Jupiter, or similar or like Jupiter and like Saturn. What do you make of that?
oh, so glad you asked. If you wanted to like give Algol like planetary association, I think that Algol is like the nature of both the North Node and the South Node. And like
Ooh, that's interesting.
that shit. It's because it's an eclipse, like it's an eclipsing star. It's just like it kind of has like all the eclipse stuff kind of built into it as a visual piece in the sky, like just kind of happening like all the time really fast. But then you just think about like what Algol does actually do. Like he definitely gets some north nodes, some like over attachment to physical things, like want to do this. I'm like, well, like
Yeah.
get really intense, like the north node does. But then like you got some disgust in there too, and like general distaste for um humanity, civilization, whatever you want to insert there. Algol does, I've seen it make things disappear for sure. Makes my
Oh,
stuff
true.
disappear
Oh,
all the
wow.
time.
Oh,
But
yeah, because that's also another thing that we didn't talk about, that you yourself are an Algol native.
yeah, I have Mercury conjunct Algol like by like 10 minutes, I think. It's
Oh,
like
cool.
about as conjunct Algol as it can be. And yeah, that's kind of like what made it weird doing the video a little bit because I felt like I didn't want to be too self-referential. I'm not the living embodiment of Algol, thank God. But some of the things that discussed apply to me in some ways and others not. But I think that's why I probably spent so much time studying Algol over the last, you know.
Because you were trying to understand yourself, or because you were trying to see Algol outside of yourself?
Yeah, I wanted to understand what it really was because I kept reading about how terrible it is and how incredibly unfortunate it is. And I wanted to know what that actually was. Do I need to live in constant fear of being decapitated? Or can it mean other things? What does it actually mean? What can I associate it with in my life? And how much do I really need to freak out about this?
Yeah. And that's always interesting with fixed stars too, because I also have a fixed star that's really prominent in my chart, which is Procyon. If you read about the star, they will always, whenever there's a dog involved, there's always like danger of being bitten by dogs or being
Yeah.
killed by wolves or something of the sort. But in my experience, for the most part, I've really always had like a way with dogs. I was actually terrified of dogs growing up, but I learned that I'm just like naturally very good with dogs. So it's interesting to always ask people how the star manifests in their life, because we get like one or two lines in Ptolemy or some other person's book talking about it, but with the planets, and we know this with the planets, it can really manifest in a myriad of different ways. So yeah, that's cool that you didn't get decapitated,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
you don't have, or you don't necessarily have to be afraid of that per se.
I mean, there's things that I can, give it credit for that I don't love. Like
Things
it's
you've done that you regret, you mean?
mm,
Or things that have happened to you that you just don't love?
things that probably have happened, things that, regularly happen, some attitudes that I have that while I don't necessarily think they're invalid, I just don't, they're not convenient for me to have. I don't need to be constantly aware of how sort of shows up for me a lot is when I'm driving. It does rule my third house, and it's Mercury. It's like how irrational traffic patterns can be sometimes, and how like the lights are set up almost like to make you late for things. I don't know. I get like really disproportionately upset about being stuck in
Oh,
traffic, and
true.
you bring about within me a disgust for civilization, which, for the record, I am pro civilization, but there's sometimes it's not very much fun. Sometimes,
Sometimes it's not easy to
yeah,
remain pro civilization.
yeah. Everybody else be part of civilization, and maybe I get to dip every now and then. I don't know.
True. But just getting back to that one question about Jupiter, Saturn, and that whole thing, would you favor then Algol being of the nature of the nodes as opposed to the nature of Jupiter and Saturn? What do you even do with the concept of fixed stars being of the nature of so and so planet? Because some people reject that altogether and they're like, the fixed star is just a thing of their own. Like,
Yeah.
where do you sit in that?
Uh, I mean, I like the tool, the associating them with planets, and that it's a descriptively helpful. I think it's a problem when you lean on it too hard, but it helps you categorize
Mhm.
it and start to build a feel for what the star is about. So a lot of the stars, they're not that well developed in terms of
Yeah.
what their significations are. Like Procyon is a good example where, like, oh, yeah, it's the little dog, right? And
Mhm.
Sirius is the big dog. And Sirius is one I really don't even like is very well developed in terms of what its significations are. Though it's the brightest star in the sky, but Algol has such a reputation that it begs to be developed. I like the notes for Algol just because they are malefics. They're not necessarily only malefic. And like there's serious like eclipsey vibes with it.
Cool. So you see it more as like an interpretation tool rather than like Saturn rules Capricorn, where it's more of like
Yeah.
a technical framework.
Yeah. I think it's like an interpretive tool. And then maybe as like a consideration when you're looking at like what planet is on the star of like,
Yeah.
oh, like how amenable is that planet to, the alien infestation that it's receiving.
Yeah. Because that's even a thing that we do use in astrological magic. Like whenever we want to make a talisman of a fixed star, typically you want a planet that's said to be of the nature of that star to be
Mhm.
aspecting it in one way or another. Conjunctions are the best, which we were lucky to get on this one.
Oh
But
yeah.
this reminds me of a tweet from, I think it's Chloe Margarita. I hope I'm saying her name right. She's really big on fixed stars, and she's always talking about fixed stars. And one of these days, she was talking about this relationship of like stars being of the nature of so and so planet and whatever, and how she thinks it's more likely that it's the planets that are of the nature of the stars. Because if you're looking at the Chaldean order, and you were getting into like the prima mobilia and all that stuff, the fixed stars are actually in a higher plane than the planets. So it's kind of like they're the first in order. How do you feel about that idea as like maybe Saturn, Jupiter being somewhat of the nature of Algol as opposed to the other way around?
I would say that the stars definitely come first in terms of power. Jupiter isn't going to have an influence on Algol. It's going to influence how, obviously, it's manifested in a person's life, but the star has its own light. It doesn't need our sun to illuminate it. The planets do.
Cool. And why do you think that we don't use stars so much in or Western milieu if they're so powerful? If they're influencing the planets, why is it that you think that people don't really use them?
I think it might have something to do with, one, they're not all that well developed sometimes in traditional literature. Sometimes you'll see it come up in the delineation and you're like, okay, that's helpful. I can squeeze something out of that. But overall, I feel like you get like, this star's eminent, this star sucks, this star will make people make fun of you. They don't have the richness of interpretability that the planet does.
Yeah.
Or at least we don't have that as readily available, which I think was, a little bit of the intention with exploring Algol as in depth as we did, is to give it like, a well-developed set of significations.
Oh, cool. And how is the process of doing that, of developing a whole interpretation framework for a placement that maybe you have never used before in your life? How do you go about doing that?
I imagine that like ancient astrologers, probably like more spiritual, probably had a lot less distractions and were able to like probably just like get zapped every now and then with like
get in the zone.
Yeah. At least for me, I really get kind of obsessed with the star. I start looking at charts, periods and events associated with the star, where that's really prominent. And I start to kind of flesh out almost like a nonverbal kind of space that I eventually want to start pulling words out of. It's just like, what does that star feel like? What does that star look like? What kind of shit does it do? That kind of thing. I think it comes from spending a lot of time with it.
Spending a lot of time with looking at the charts.
Looking at the charts, looking at events, talking to people that have star prominent, maybe like, talking to it when the moon's like on it,
Yeah, totally. Because I'm definitely more on that camp of trying to get zapped.
Yeah, I got too much Earth to.
That's true.
I can, observe the world and learn things.
Yeah, no, definitely. But the only reason why I'm asking that is because I'm always curious about the process that different astrologers go through. Because I think it's always good to have like a bit of a balance of both. Because some people reject the possibility of getting zapped by the powers that be and just stay in the charts. But there are other people that only try to get zapped and don't look at any charts.
Yeah.
But I do think that it's good to embrace both. And I think that that's why our video worked out so well, because I'm more of the zapping realm and you're more of the charts realm, and I guess we brought both of our perspectives together in a very nice way.
Yeah. I'm open to getting zapped, but I'm also not always trustful of the zapping.
Yeah, that's true.
Zap some pretty wild stuff, and it's not all. Who are you getting zapped by? I don't know.
That is true. That is a good point.
But more receptive to the zap, So you're more of a zapper?
I guess I am more of a zapper. Well, not really. I think I'm also the same as you, where I'm like in both camps. But naturally, I think it's my Sun-Neptune opposition just brings me towards the zapping. And that's why it was so good, because people don't know this, but the process for this video was that you did the research first, and then I came in and wrote all the stuff later. And in many ways, I think that reading your research and going through the charts that you had, and even like the astronomy of it all, which I already knew some of it because I had to teach a class for Astrology Hub on fixed stars, and even just that gave me enough, I guess, materials to try and get zapped by. Because it very much feels like whenever you're trying to make a talisman, you're trying to get all these items that are related to that divinity of some sort. But I think the same can be said about the information, like collecting the information from that star and then just like really holding it in your brain until you get zapped. And that's kind of how it was for me. Like even the motif in the lyrics of the song where it's like of three the only one, and I just repeated that 1,000 billion times. That totally just came from like just the whole 3-star thing. The more and more I sat with the myth and I sat with the research, and even as I was editing the song, editing the video, I kept seeing this 3 motif, and I'm like, there's something to 3-ness in Algol. But yeah, I hope I answered the question.
No, I actually, I mean, I kind of feel like it ended up facilitating what we both naturally want to do, which we had no bosses on the project. So
that's true.
You went to art school, right?
I went to art school.
Okay, so that kind of makes sense. Like almost like approaching it the way an artist would, like, you know, learning a bit about it, but like sort of like waiting for like the inspiration to come or talk to you.
Totally.
And even like kind of exploring it through symbols rather than as directly. I studied history, so like I want to see what it did. But that's one thing I wanted to ask you, speaking of symbols, was the use of diamonds that sort of ran through your version of the myth. Yeah. I'm curious. I have some ideas about what it means, but I was hoping to get your clarification.
Yeah. Well, when I was starting to work on the video and even trying to conceptualize YouTube channel as a whole and like what kind of content I wanted to bring to the table, I really just had to sit with what I love doing. And what I love doing is speaking about things without directly speaking about them. Like all the information is there, and if you're initiated, if you will, you're totally gonna get what I'm doing. But if you're not, then it's just like a cool story. And even before I was an astrologer and got into astrological magic and all that stuff, even my lyrics were always like riddled with crazy nonsense that to me made a lot of sense, but to a person that doesn't know the context, it doesn't. And that's what I was trying to do with the diamond, because the diamond is the stone that we use for Algol materials in astrological magic. And even the hellebore that I used and the wormwood in the scene where there's the ritual for invoking Medusa, I wanted to make sure that the myth itself kind of taught you how to make an Algol talisman or how to invoke Algol and all the pieces that you'd need to actually make that happen. And that's why the diamond came to be a motif time and time again. But one thing that I also wanted to do with the myth, because ever since we posted it, a lot of people came asking me, like, where did I get the myth? Because a lot of people didn't realize that I actually changed it a bit by myself. The main reason why I wanted to change things is that I also wanted the story to portray my sort of worldview and the animist world that I am so deeply embedded in. So when I was writing the myth, I wanted it to almost be like an origin myth for the diamond. And I think that that's very clear. It is an origin myth for the diamond. And that I wanted to also juxtapose that the diamond also has this spirit, and the spirit of the diamond is like this. So that's why I used the diamond.
That's interesting. I actually didn't know that diamonds were associated with Algol.
Yeah.
And I think I've seen it like associated with Saturn before. I've also seen it associated with Venus and like planets. But thinking about it like associated with Algol, sort of, I liked thinking about it that way. It was like a nice way to think about Algol.
Yeah.
The idea of something that's forged over vast amounts of time and pressure.
Yeah, definitely.
Kind of seems, I don't know, like there is like a point. I think sometimes for me, at least, maybe because I'm an Algol native and it's something that I've seen in like other Algol natives, is like this tendency towards like a kind of ultra materialist, kind of nihilistic worldview that like there is no point to anything. It's just like, well, you know, your point now as a human is to reproduce and eat and not die. And that's about it. And everything else we do is like entertainment. Right?
Yeah.
And it's
just
usually
extra stuff. The sprinkle.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not the most inspiring worldview or uplifting, but I like that sort of idea that the suffering or the unpleasantness, the pain, the pressure can have a point, like these diamonds being.
Yeah, totally. And even thinking about it, like how we use diamonds these days, like diamond tipped tools and how they can break through really hard things. And how even thinking about a diamond shield in the myth and how that could be the ultimate shield also because of just how rock hard and solid that is. It was a pretty interesting exploration of the mineral itself and trying to see how that related to how I could fit that into the myth one way or another. Because one of the things too that brought me to change the myth in the way that I did is that not only I wanted it to be like an origin story for the diamond, but also kind of like a glimpse into my thinkings around the gods and how things are brought into this world and like the consequences and the consequences of the thoughts of gods and like the power that they have, but also the power that they don't have, and like the omniscience that they have, and also the things that they don't know. Because even in my myth, it starts with Athena creating the diamond, and she knows that Medusa's gonna go through a lot of shit, but she is not really aware of how that shit is gonna unfold. And that's what I was saying about telling things without telling them directly, because that's very much how I view my astrology. I'm like, yes, you can predict all these things, you can know that things will happen, but you might not know exactly how they're gonna happen. And when you're in that moment, you're gonna figure out what to do with that. If that makes any sense.
Oh, yeah. And it's sort of brought me back around to like wanting to focus on myths more. Because like when I used to think that I was like a mythology person until I started hanging out with astrologers. And then I realized that like but like so much of even just the process of interpreting myths and like figuring out like, oh, what does this mean? What is it like a stand-in for is essentially what astrology is. Like it's, symbol here combined with like these symbols, like what is it telling us? And what it tells us can be like a wide range of things, which is something that I like appreciated about your approach to the myth, is that having spent so much time with like a lot of the traditional ones, I could interpret it like 10 different ways, where this figure is a bad guy and this one, it's telling you that this is bad and this is good, but actually this version of it tells you that, this is bad. But like that's kind of like the beauty of myths, is that you can kind of cycle them through and take different things out of them.
Yeah.
But I don't know where I was going with that exactly.
Well, I do have a question for you in regards to the myth, though. Did you have any sort of qualms or reservations when I brought the idea of changing the myth and making it a new thing? Or even to make the question bigger, what do you think about our role as astrologers and as mythologists? Are we meant to be making new myths and re-mythologizing our astrology? Or no, the myths are sacred?
The myths aren't sacred. Start there. I mean, they are to the degree that like we keep telling them and retelling them, but we've already been kind of telling them and then telling them in different ways. And that's part of why they're valuable, is that they can evolve and they can change. But there's still something like in the root narrative structure that must come through. I'm not necessarily an advocate for saying you can't do that. I think that if it works, let it work. It's something I've gone back and forth about, I think, with astrology in general. It's like what we're doing when we're interpreting the chart is giving sort of our version of what we think that their life looks like and what it seems to be about. But like, that's the thing with myths and even just stories, is that the meaning part is kind of up to us.
Right.
Meaning kind of changes everything too. Like you can retell the story of Medusa and Perseus, where like Medusa's like kind of the hero, which like in your version, I felt like Medusa was like kind of an anti-hero. Well,
oh, cool.
Like and you like empathize with her more. And there were like kind of versions of that, but I kind of keep forgetting that the myth is actually about Perseus. But it suits, where I think we're at as a society now, to like focus more on the Medusa side.
Sure, that's interesting.
And I think at the end of the day, it just needs to be useful. And I think that the myth structure doesn't need our help necessarily to be preserved.
Mm-hmm.
It exists because it works. We sort of need to tell it, I think, around that structure for it to compel people in the same way. So it will kind of do its own job, it'll sort
Yeah.
of, it'll self-perpetuate.
Yeah,
I don't think
totally. And I think even also thinking about the myth outside of me and having created it. If this myth does go on to have a life of its own and it gets retold in the way that I told it, people will take things out that they don't feel like belong there, and they'll add their own things, and they'll continue to do that. And I think eventually what's meant to be there will always be there, and
Yeah.
that's why the Poseidon Medusa scene in my version is different, but it still talks about exactly the same sort of feelings and circumstances. Because I think if I didn't have that, it just wouldn't be the myth of Medusa anymore. It would just be
Yeah.
some other story.
I feel like it very clearly has its origins in the myth structure. It's there, and that's what was really interesting about it, is sort of seeing sort of the same pieces, but then almost bringing out this part of the story that was always there, bringing it out kind of more here. The diamond O-face statues.
Oh, yes.
What's people frozen in moments of ecstasy, basically.
Yeah.
I'm curious why. Well, because I think that there's a lot of that pleasure seeking in Algol, almost just because it's so rooted in carnality, it's savage little beast,
Mm-hmm.
But the being frozen in that state, I'm curious what I don't know, was there
what drove me to make that choice?
Yeah.
Well, I think there's two pieces to that. The reason why I wanted them to be diamond sculptures is because it's actually more so, it's a thing that you see more in the song. And this is me yet again telling things without telling them directly, because if you listen to the myth and then you listen to the song actually adds more context to certain things in the myth and vice versa. And in the rap section, it starts with calling out Medusa as she was just reborn as the monstrous thing, but I call her a lich, and that's why I wanted the sculptures to be a diamond, because by extension, if she is a lich, and liches in mythology and monsters, they live through their pieces of their soul being in other objects. So for me, that was just, the more Medusa seeks out revenge and the more she freezes people, the longer she'll live, or the harder she'll be to destroy. Because now there's more diamonds with more pieces of her soul. And for you to really get rid of her, you'd have to get rid of, one, all the diamonds in the world, which is already impossible in and of itself. But the more hungry she gets for revenge, the harder that becomes also. But the O-face thing is that I really wanted the myth to kind of have this sort of cyclical thing going on. Because even thinking about the astronomy piece that you brought with the two stars orbiting themselves, I really kind of got this sort of the cycle of vengeance, or the cycle of hatred, and the cycle of abuse and pain, and how to reflect that into the story. And so I wanted the monstrous Medusa to use all of the things that Poseidon used against her as a weapon in some sort. So if Poseidon used sexuality as a weapon, then she reversed that and did the opposite. Instead of completing the deed, she made it stop. So you never actually got there. You got really close, but never there. And that was the idea around that.
I love that. That's perfect. It ends up hitting multiple, I think, threads throughout that are in the myth, and that's, I think why I enjoyed the way you presented it on multiple levels. It was I don't know. It was almost all the same pieces are there and more or less in the same order, but sort of, I don't know.
Remixed.
Yeah, it was like a remix almost.
Yeah, totally. But yeah, I think that was really it. You'll get to notice the sort of cyclical nature of the myth, even through the acts. The way that I split the acts, I kind of wanted them to have that same structure of what happens and things like that. So even when Perseus comes into the scene, Perseus is just repeating what Medusa did, but to Poseidon. She resisted him the same way that he resisted the zombified temple followers and all of that stuff. Being possessed at the end mirrors how Medusa got possessed also, and it just continues on and on forever.
Yes. And that's, I mean, it's something that, like, I didn't even really get to talk about, but, like, you kind of end up hitting it that way. Is like this, the revenge cycle thing. That cycle of revenge thing shows up all the time with Algol, and I think it's part of what makes it so sticky. Because usually, like, Algol things, like, they almost don't have a solution, an obvious one built into them. You can probably find the origin story where person A really started it because they transgressed against person B, but the retaliation, which sometimes can go up in scale, kind of constant ratcheting up, just sort of creates a big mess that, what do you do?
It like snowballs in itself.
And like something that I think about a lot with, I don't know, certain things that happen in the world, things that are happening now, things that have happened in the past, where we really want to think that there's a solution to it, and there is, but often it's not a nice one. It's not one that both parties leave intact and satisfied in some way. Sometimes it's like, well, you got to just let one win.
Yeah.
And like, I don't think we like that very much, but I think Algol will sometimes bring that to the surface. But I think what I liked also is at the end, you had Perseus, like, might have to re-describe it to me, but like he could always hear her, right, in his mind? Or like,
yes, he can still, because when he gets the shield from Athena, he can communicate with the shield no problem. And that kind of continues on. But when he first gets it from Athena, this is Medusa, just like her good half. It's kind of like missing all of the memories of pain and suffering that she had to go through. But then once those are reunited, then now he can hear all of that stuff. And he has to like sit with her pain and with her desire for vengeance constantly. I was even watching Once Upon a Time. I don't know if you ever watched that. It's like a soap opera. But it's a soap opera about fairy tale characters. And there's this one character which is called the Dark One, and essentially what it is that he has a dagger that passes on from person to person, and it's like all the evil in the world is in that dagger. But then once you kill the previous person that owns the dagger, you gain all their power and all the darkness, and you become immortal until you're totally consumed by the darkness. But then eventually somebody comes in to stop the darkness. They kill the Dark One. Consequently, they become the Dark One, and the cycle just goes on and on forever. And that was like a similar thing that I kind of was going for.
Yeah, which I feel like that part of the myth, which wasn't really depicted the same way in the original, but was kind of stressed more, the sort of cost of triumphing over your enemies, right?
Yeah.
Or that you end up carrying the mark of that almost. If Algol does signify sometimes atrocious things, in sometimes situation where you have no choice but to do an atrocious thing, you still carry the memory of that.
Yeah.
The sort of the perpetrators of atrocities also, not that we need to feel super sorry for them, but like that doesn't leave. Like it has a cost.
Yeah.
It's like the parting blow of the victim.
Yeah.
Which I think you see kind of in the astronomy. It's that like the stars going back and forth.
Yeah, like and that was the thing that I was wondering too, because you talk about how it's the small star that's eating the big one. But then what happens when the small star eats the big one and becomes the big one? The new small ones start to eat the big one, and they just go at that forever. That was a really interesting thought, and that's kind of where I got into that whole cyclical thing. But
yeah. I think, I mean, and I'm not
an astronomer,
or an astronomer, but I think that because stars have a life cycle, and really the reason for those stars being the way that they are was because the small stars live longer. So like as the big one starts to die and diffuse, it's like, oh, gobble that up. But like that also has a cost for the small stars. Like, oh, now its evolution is going to speed up. It's not going to live as long. I think that there is an endpoint with that one. And with most revenge cycles, there is an endpoint, but like it isn't one where either party is usually satisfied.
Yeah. Both of them will just end up in death.
Yeah, there's a price. It's not really a zero-sum game. It's almost like there's a negative sum overall, like which happens with war, right? You want to take territory from somebody else to get that economic output for yourself. You have to damage that thing fundamentally. So like everybody loses. There's a net loss there. Which, I don't know. It's ugly. I don't have like a...
But it is a part of life nonetheless.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I was also thinking even on the lighter side of Algol, even just talking about like our own fears. And this is something that we discussed before, how like, yes, you can conquer your fear. You can be like Perseus triumphant. And you defeated your fear. But then it's not like your fear is really gone. Like you're just got used to that fear and you now know that you can tackle it at times, but you have to constantly tackle them. You have to constantly fight against them. It's not a thing that's like a one and done and it's all good.
How to be afraid, almost. Like it's...
Yeah, totally.
How to continue to operate, not be paralyzed, when you're afraid, or maintain mental clarity, while you're afraid, which is exceedingly hard to do. Which I think is like a lot of what I think, probably came across, but you find that in sort of the mythology and like the archetype and like the whole idea of like losing your head, right? Is that the sort of animal instinctual part of us is sort of placed in opposition to the mind. And like they don't want to like fully live together, hopefully what ends up coming out is that like neither are bad. The fact that you occasionally have a murderous impulse, that, it's actually probably good to like know that part still works.
That's true.
But like live with that and use it only when necessary. Hopefully never. You kind of have to keep it alive too. I don't know. You have to feed it, which like I recommend laser tag. It's great.
Oh, cool. Is that like your Algol remediation?
Mars stuff, like it's, I think what it hits in particular is like that sense of almost like survival mode where all you're thinking about is like, who am I going to shoot next? Or who might be around the next corner? Mm-hmm. And like, there's like space for like long-term strategy, but it never goes past a certain point. Sure. And, I think most Algol natives probably have to have something like that to give that space. Dance can be a place to do that as well. Mercury is an awkward planet to have on Algol because Algol is sort of like anti-mind sometimes. So I don't know. Having like an outlet for that is cool.
That does bring me to a question though, because we keep talking about Algol natives, but we haven't really quite qualified what an Algol native is. How would you qualify an Algol native? How would you even know if Algol is a prominent star in your chart? Because since astrological magic is more of like my focus, whenever I'm working with fixed stars and clients come with me working with fixed stars, it's usually more like, I want to work with so-and-so star. Is that star like a good star for me to work with? And that's an easy answer for me to get to. But like, I don't know if those rules would also apply to trying to figure out if you're an Algol native or not. How do you go about that?
Yeah, actually, I think I have a good answer for that. Because when I was doing research, I kept identifying things where I was like, oh, wow, that has to be an Algol thing. And I was right surprisingly often once I got a sense of what it was. Yeah. And there were times where I'm like, well, I see there's a bunch of stuff like in late Earth signs that are sort of trying the star, but I think what it comes down to is that it's always a matter of degree. Like, we all have all the stars in the sky in our charts at all times. And they are probably all speaking on some level to all of us because their light is always a present factor. It's just a matter of how tied into other planets it is, or important angles. I think what we're always doing is sort of prioritizing interpretations. I would start with a conjunction, but if you have a bunch of planets at 26 degrees, all the Earth signs except for Taurus and all the water signs, every time a planet transits that point, it's going to ping everything in your chart with Algol stuff.
Yeah.
Does that make you a native? I don't know.
A bit of an Algol zing.
Yeah. You're a
sprinkle of Algol.
Algol can come visit you regularly. Maybe you're not a native, but like you're an associate or something.
Cool. I like that. Well, if we were to, for the sake of the audience watching it and trying to sit with their own charts to figure this out, would you say planets conjoined Algol in any of the angles? So the ascendant, descendant, midheaven, IC. Do you toss in the non-adjustable in there as well? So like if it's square the ascendant, but not necessarily at the midheaven?
That's a good question. I guess I instinctively, even though my research on it has suggested that those things are more relevant maybe than we think. Again, like, because your planets are going to be doing other things, you're probably going to want to prioritize like what they're doing. And then, like that Algol square the ascendant it's probably doing something. It's probably making that more relevant to you. Because again, like every time a planet transits there, it's every time you get a square to your ascendant, it's Algol. It's an Algol square.
Yeah, totally.
So like I think it matters, and you should pay attention to it. But I guess it's always like a matter of degree, which we're not. I don't know. Maybe we're in the contest. I don't know how much people end up playing the game where, well, I'm more Algol than you are because
I'm sure there are people like that in the world.
Yeah. Most Algol, which there are people who are more Algol.
Yeah, totally.
For sure. I've met some. But
just like a stellium right on Algol.
What gets tricky though, well, one, there's like an orb thing that is tricky with Algol because it seems to have a wider orb than most stars. I think William Lilly gave it like 5 degrees,
right.
like on either side, which is nuts. But you also get the Pleiades thing, which let's see, what Pleiades is 0 degrees Gemini right now?
0 degrees Gemini. Some of them are still in 29 Taurus, I think.
Okay, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, maybe that just changed. I think Maya just precessed into Gemini this year.
Okay. Yeah, well, that just basically Algol and the Pleiades are not they're less than 4 degrees apart. They're like 3 degrees and like some minutes apart. Their like orbs are gonna like overlap. And like to some degree, I have a hard time telling the difference sometimes. Like I'll see something that I think is an Algol thing and it's like, oh, that's actually looks more like a Pleiades thing, but I can't like not see Algol there. But that was something. And then maybe this can be up for consideration if you're looking for its influence, is that Algol, more so the Pleiades technically, but the Nakshatra Kritika, the Vedic lunar mansion, which it's like root star is the Pleiades, but also incorporate like Algol is also part of it. And that whole nakshatra has like the fucking like the flavor of Algol on it, to at least from where I can see. There's all sorts of like cutting violence and anger, but also like deep concern for like the people close to them. It's like a very tribal kind of energy.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, because even from a mythological standpoint, their myths also share some motifs Like with Medusa, she is assaulted by Poseidon in the original myth, and one of them is for the Pleiades, because the Pleiades is probably one of the group of stars that has the most amount of myths. But in one of them, the seven sisters are also being chased by this man. I think it's either a man who wants to marry them all, or wants to marry one of them, or not marry, more so like assault, because they're not interested in that. But even like this whole theme of like being chased by that sort of a male figure, or like the male hunger, and having to escape from it in some sort of dramatic way, because the sisters have to turn themselves into stars to escape from the guy, and then Medusa transforms into a monstrosity. So there's definitely a lot of parallels there.
Yeah, definitely like a there's some victims and some perpetrators in both stories. So you can see, I think that and I could be wrong, like in some of like the Vedic retellings of the seven sisters, like they're all like violent as fuck.
Oh, what?
They're all like the cutting sisters or something. I can't remember, but yeah, thinking of how those two stars could like color that whole like slice of the zodiac, which, you know, I highly recommend looking at the nakshatras. They're super interesting, and you really can see the themes when you spend some time with them. But that, like, I don't know, like, if you have it in that nakshatra, but like nowhere near other star, like, are you part of that star's like family almost, or which like would we apply that to other stars too? It's a good question.
Big
But
questions.
but what I meant to say is, in recording, I didn't intend originally to focus so much on like the masculine, feminine stuff and like the female against male, vice versa, like conflict that is like in the myth and like comes up a lot around the star. Because I feel like you can get a lot of what Algol is doing without discussing that. And it's not like the only part of it. But like almost as I was getting the idea out, it kind of kept coming through, and like wanting to speak, almost, or like it kind of got me thinking that it might be a bigger thing with the star than.
Yeah, totally.
Obviously, it's not, you know, limited to people who are born male or female, but like that dynamic, that exploitation of one over the other, like I think is super
Of like
super.
of the feminine principle rather than women specifically, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. I was surprised at how much it needed to be a part of the conversation. Like you can see that with both the Pleiades.
Yeah, totally. And I think that it's like that patch of sky talks about like the spooky sides of femininity, whatever that may be. I don't know where it comes from, but there is something there for sure.
Yeah. It's funny because I got in this conversation with my kid the other day, and they were talking about how like all their girlfriends are like they're just like better behaved than the boys, right? Like all the problems like come from boys, right? Wanting to like break the rules or like not be civilized, really.
Yeah.
Which kind of got me thinking about like Algol again, because it's
yeah,
really
we're in that zone.
Yeah. But it's like, I mean, traditionally, socially, women are socialized to be more civilized, to obey the rules, to consider others and behave within a pretty circumscribed set of behaviors. While men are sort of given the privilege of being uncivilized.
Being celebrated for being uncivilized also.
Yeah. There's like a weird sort of hypocrisy in that to me. It's like, well, like I'll be civilized to the degree that it serves me, but you better be civilized. I think that, like, I see that theme in Algol, in a lot of ways, which I mean comes back to that like exploitation thing.
Yeah.
It's like, here's a system for you to obey, but for me to obey or not obey. You
Yeah,
know, like
it's optional for me.
which I wanted to ask, what do you think's up with the Poseidon Athena rivalry? Like, what do
Poseidon
you think?
Athena rivalry, that is interesting. And in my myth, I did think about that a lot.
Mhm.
I know that they just have like a feud in mythology. I don't know exactly where it started, but every time and time again, you always see Poseidon and Athena having some sort of qualms. But to me, what I took, because in rewriting the myth, I also wanted to rewrite it with no or modern understanding of Poseidon Neptune in the mix as well. Um, and then just in sitting and reflecting and meditating upon that, I thought that really the bigger qualm was that of like Neptune, fertility, imagination, nothing's clear, everything's possible, versus Athena, which is like very clear cut. This is how things are
Yeah.
done. This is this is the way to go. The power of the mind, and I guess both of them speak of the mind in one way, but I guess that's where I saw the poem. Where the poem is the two sides of the mind, like the creative mind versus the direct fact-based mind, and everything in between. Because in the original myth, even as I was writing it, there was a piece that I actually removed because I wanted Poseidon. One of Poseidon's motives for doing what he did was to steal the egg and then also turn the egg into like this phallus made out of a diamond. So it's like a symbol of his virility. And then he could use that to like create some sort of beast or whatever. But then I was like, I'm getting too far into the weeds here,
Mhm.
and I took that out. But I do think it's about this sort of play between like the mind that conceptualizes what's real versus the mind that would much rather stay in the unreal sort of realm of things,
Mhm.
which is to me was like the realm of desire and creation versus the realm of like restraint and preservation.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I feel like that came through really strong with your version of it. Athena almost like representing. Uh, it's funny because like I can go through it multiple ways, but like Athena ends up sort of representing a certain type of civilization almost,
yeah,
or like a set of like restraints and rules and customs that are almost more actively a response to like what Poseidon speaks to like the sort of the chaos of things like desire, and emotions, like the unconscious, I guess, like because he's the ruler of the ocean, right?
hmm
Um, which I feel like Algol or Medusa ends up being the center of like a direct confrontation with that. And it's like thinking of like Athena's working with Medusa, as like trying to find a place um, for her to like to be a savage almost, like to keep the savage part alive within herself, right? But
oh,
still
sure,
like be civilized. I don't know. But
yeah.
like it took like Neptune to not Neptune.
Well, same thing, just different name, same god, different name.
But they're like fundamentally at odds with each other at the end of
Yeah.
the day.
What I did find interesting though, and I still haven't really quite come to terms with that, what that means is that even in the original myth, and in my myth also, Medusa is somewhat of like Poseidon's child. Because she comes from the sea. She comes from sea gods that are under Poseidon's rule. And I still don't know what that means. But I think it's very intriguing that she is born from that world and she rejects it in favor of civility as opposed to the not uncivilized, but the sort of like bacchanal realm of Poseidon, you know?
Yeah. Well, actually, I mean, it makes kind of perfect sense how Poseidon would, almost like, especially like monster Medusa, like even in the traditional myth, Medusa is essentially a product of Poseidon and Athena, like of their rivalry.
Hmm.
And like not necessarily beneficiary of that, but it's almost like where that crack is or where that intersection is between being wild, hedonistic savages and being civilized Athenians. It's like you get the products of that intersection are Medusas, right?
Yeah. And they constantly eclipse each other.
Yeah. Yeah, but kind of speaks to like how difficult of an intersection that is. I mean, you get things like war, which is kind of like the institutionalizing of something that is super savage,
Mhm.
which can be kind of problematic. Like maybe we shouldn't institutionalize this process. Like
Right.
maybe you two just need to have a fight. But I don't know.
Yeah, and that is the interesting thing, both in the Medusa, in the original myth and in my myth, because even though there's this rivalry, they never actually fight each other. It's just like, I'll do this to fuck you up, and I'll do this to fuck you up. But they could very easily, they both live in the same place. They're both Olympians. Like, why the hell? Don't they just
There's
like figure shit out on their own? Um,
a proxy war
yeah, totally.
all the time. Yeah. I mean, I feel like it's something that I'm noticing becoming more present during this transit for me. It's like the pressure between like something as simple as I really want to do what I want to do today. I already have these things that I really want to do, but I have all of these things that are sort of socially mandated that I have to do too. And the place where they meet is almost like a place of pressure. And you have to like, if you
Wheel.
let it will cause damage, but maybe you need to forge a diamond there or something.
Yeah.
Finding that place of pressure is like a creative place, but not a fun one to inhabit necessarily.
Yeah, no, totally. I've been getting similar things, but for me, it was more so a reflection around facing some of my own fears to be able to do what it is that I want to do. Um, like even like being able to take the, because I'm a very Neptunian sort of person, and even taking like things out of that Neptunian realm to real life and how to
Mhm.
actually, and sometimes to actually do that you have to do a lot of things that you don't want to do or that are very difficult to do or very troublesome, um, but in doing them then you figure out that you also have the tenacity, to use a word that I use in my Algol talisman, to actually like put yourself through that, to
Yeah.
gain the thing that you want. But Algol is also my 11th, so
Yeah.
it color. I feel like it colors it in a more positive way.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah,
Yeah. I mean, that makes a lot of sense actually. Now it almost just seems like, oh yeah, I get that now. Like it's really hard to direct like anger in a constructive way, especially as like we have more and more laws and rules and more awareness of like how we impact other people and
hmm.
like maybe I don't want to yell at this person because that'll hurt their feelings and I
Yeah.
care about that. But
Even
like that.
sometimes you do have to yell, and you're like not a yelly type of person.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Because
And then it's just,
that's literally how I felt recording the song for Medusa. Because I'm like, oh man, when I told you that when the idea came, I just came, and then when I was faced with sitting in front of my studio and actually having to write and record the song, I'm like, fuck, what did I get myself into? Um, but like even doing like the crazy voices and all of the like very animated and the rapping in the song, these were all things that like I actively would not do. Like I would just never do it. I never thought that I had that in me. But after having said that I was gonna already do it, I just had to kind of like rise to the occasion. Um, and it was really crazy, especially like the section where it's the actual invocation of Medusa, where Athena's coming in, and like it gets very chaotic in the song. Um, I recorded that in one take, and to this day, I'm like, I don't know what came into me that I just like came out, and it very much did feel like this sort of like, ugh, I just need to barf this out into
Yeah.
existence. Yeah,
Well, yeah, and that's like the pressure of like having made an agreement, right?
yeah,
Like, I mean, you and I, we have an institution now. It's called the Astrology Channel.
yeah,
Our feel like most artists sort of in theory feel like they just want to have all the free time to just express freely and like I
yeah,
want all the stuff, I want all the paint, I want everything accessible when I want it, exactly when I want it. So that like I can do a thing when the impulse arises, when the inspiration arises. And it's usually endlessly frustrating for artist types because the world doesn't necessarily accommodate that, except for in rare instances where you're, extremely successful at it. But even they have like businesses and they have pressure and
yeah,
obligations.
totally.
But like that also is kind of where the magic happens and like where almost like necessary to pump the diamonds out, you need a little bit of pressure to actually do it. Otherwise, you're just in your imagination all the time thinking of all the things you could do.
That's
Which
such a good place to be sometimes. Such a comfortable place to be.
Yeah, it's Poseidon's realm, perhaps, just in the water. But and that is one of the planetary associations, I think, with Algol it's also gets a Mars Saturn accreditation,
Cool.
which think of like the hammer and the anvil.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of that, like, banging it out.
Just get it done.
Yeah.
No matter the cost, sort of feel.
Yeah. Yeah. I always feel like Algol, why it's a problem is because it's almost like too much. And like it kind of really has to cook for a while because it doesn't have like an easy outlet. Sort of by nature, doesn't have an easy path to go.
Yeah.
But like there's potential there. There's something that can do with it.
Yeah. In working with the talismans that I made during that election, it's been pretty good so far.
Yeah.
It feels really nice.
Yeah.
I'm still waiting to like properly digest it all and like put it all in like a piece of writing or like a video before I send it off to the world and other people can interact with it. But the biggest thing for me, it really was that, and this was the word that I used in the talisman, which was the tenacity word. I think that's the most positive quality of Algol, is being able to invoke that tenacity and that sort of like, I'm just gonna fucking do it, fuck everybody else sort of thing.
Yeah, no, I would say that's can be positive.
That's true. It can be positive if the thing that you want to do is positive.
Yeah, but I mean, I'd seen it with other Algol people. In general, like you get a lot of like, fuck this with Algol. Like, I don't want anything to do with this. Like, dipping hard, which like I've definitely done to my benefit and to, my detriment. Like, oh, driving is super lame. There's so many things wrong with it. Like, polluting the environment. Like, fuck it, I'm done with driving. I could do that, but then I can't get it. Yeah. We can't do that. So you got to sit with the pressure. Maybe.
True.
Can't go live in the forest, or I could, but I don't actually want to live in the forest.
Yeah,
that's
that's
for me.
I would love to live in the forest with internet, but
yeah, like still want to be part of civilization.
Yeah, at least a little bit.
Yeah, I'm a little bit further away from it.
Oh man, but we've been at it for almost an hour now, so I think it's a good time to close.
Yeah.
Do you have one last question about my contribution to the video? And I'll ask you one last question about your contribution to the video that you absolutely need answered, and then we'll go from there.
I did. I had my list, but I just had to close it. Well, maybe not as exciting of a question, but like I really want to know how you did the strings in the
Oh,
song.
cool.
And it sounds like, I don't know, like a real violin, like is that real? Real
They
violin?
are samples.
Okay,
It's
right.
multiple sample libraries of violins playing in a specific way. So I used four libraries. One of them kind of does this sort of descending thing. So I guess out of tune towards the end of the note. And that's what's playing the chords throughout most of the song. And I have the short sort of like horror movie staccato thing
Mm.
going on. And I have a couple swells in there. Um, and a distorted one that I use. I think it's the same as the swell, but I just distorted it so it almost has this sort of like um, guitarish sort of quality to it, this gritty thing. But no, they're not real violins. I would love to get a real violinist to play for me, but no, unfortunately.
Well, it sounded great, and I mean, I love sampling; it's fun. But the sax was real. That was Gemini Brett, right?
Yes, the sax was real. That was Gemini Brett.
Sounded incredible. Like,
Oh, it was so awesome. And he sent me so many more takes that just couldn't fit into the song, and I was so sad.
uh,
Because I just wanted to put it all in, but the song would end up being like 10 minutes long if I did that. Which
yeah,
I'm not against.
yes, have like a 10-minute version of it.
Oh, I think the original version was 8 minutes long, and then I cut a fair bit out. Um, and that's why because I also, this is not the question, but I also wanted the song to have this quality of the blinking of the star, where it's like you're here, then now you're there, and now you're here, and now you're there, and now you're there, and the song is always changing, even though it's mostly just two chords throughout the whole entire song. Um, but yeah.
Mm.
I think the only real instrument there was my voice and Gemini Brett's saxophone.
Uh, yeah, almost like deceptively simple, maybe. Like there's not as much going on as you think.
Yeah, no, totally.
It's a thing that came up. The band Devo, it's like one of the primary members had like I can't remember now, had a thing on Algol, and like all the rest of the members had like planets that would like aspect it really tightly. And that like idea of de-evolution, I wanted to like keep from Devo because it's a good way to think about it. Like de-evolve this, almost like make it more simple.
True. And that's the thing that it took me a while to learn with music, because I started learning music
Oh, yeah.
on the computer composing, and that's very dangerous because then you're like, oh yeah, it's so easy to play all these crazy things. You just like draw it out, send it to somebody, they'll play it. It's all good.
It's more layers.
Yeah,
more
no,
notes.
totally. And very recently, I think it was after I decided to not be a musician anymore and consequently became a musician again, that I learned less is more sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the notes you don't play.
Yeah, it's the notes that you don't play and the notes that you play a lot.
Was that Miles Davis?
I think so.
Because he has Mercury conjunct Algol ruling his ascendant.
Ooh, that's cool. That's awesome.
Love that.
Whoa, we did not put Miles Davis in this. We should.
I know. So many examples. So many good ones. Like I feel like I'm gonna explode with all the information I have contained within me about Algol. The Trinity test had Mars conjunct Algol.
Oh,
the first nuclear weapon ever detonated.
And that was actually gonna be my question. Like, what is your favorite chart that didn't make the cut, and why?
Oh, man, it might be Miles Davis now. It depends on when you ask me. Charles Adams actually might be one of my favorites. The creator of the Addams Family.
Creator of who?
The Addams Family.
Oh, cool. Oh, nice. I get that.
Yeah, which, I mean, sometimes it's like you'll just see really morbid shit with Algol. which is fun. Didn't get to talk about the pile of corpses thing.
Oh yeah, that's true.
With China, they call one of the stars in this constellation of stars called the mausoleum pile of corpses, and it's not actually Algol. It's kind of been floating around that Algol is called pile of corpses, but it doesn't really have a specific name, I don't think. But it is part of that mausoleum crew, which like just hanging out in the mausoleum, like the tomb. There's dead bodies around.
Yeah. And that's something that I brought into the myth, but we didn't actually like talk about it. That's an incentive for the audience to rewatch the video and do a bit of a more exegetical sort of reading of the video and read between the lines, read what we said without saying.
Yeah.
Because I think there is a lot of that, not just from me, but from you too, where we just very briefly talk about somebody or even the imagery choice that we've made, or even the B-roll choices that we've made. Because there's a lot of B-roll from like Algol natives that we didn't actually talk about in the video. So
yeah, I think that was, I mean, at the end of the day, I really like being able to use video for things, because like just being able to show rather than tell. It's almost like frustrating trying to explain some concepts. It's like, well, just look.
Yeah,
Watch
totally.
Go watch The Addams Family. You'll know what your Venus conjunct Algol is about.
Cool. Oh, he has Venus conjunct Algol?
I don't remember what he has.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
But still, I think that's actually one of the most valid ways to learn about your chart. And that's what I really like to do with my clients, at least. I love, like I said, I love saying things without saying them. And just like telling somebody to like, go look at this painting or listen to this song or like watch this show and you're going to learn something about X placement. I think that clicks in such a different way that you really understand it and you're able now to identify it out in the world. And I hope that that's what we did with the video. We gave many tools to be able to see Algol just prancing about. These times where we're having all these Algol transits. Well, by the time this is gonna be out, most of them are gonna be done. But still.
Yeah, I'd say if you're watching around release time, it is out prancing about.
And that time will come again next year and the year after, and
don't worry.
And again.
Yeah.
But well, I think that is all for today. We shall be back in the Astrology Channel very soon. I don't know what is next on queue. We have some videos in the pipeline, but just stay tuned and we'll be here soon. Thank you for watching. And if you have any questions, you can leave them in the comments. If you want to find Kyle, where can they find you, Kyle?
Oh, you can go to my website, kylepierceastrologer.com. I'm on Instagram at astrology4earthlings. That's the number 4. I don't really do a lot of Twitter, so don't even bother. But
I'm also trying to do the same. I used to be very heavy on Twitter, but not so much these days.
Yeah, my website is a hub for whatever it is that I do. So
cool.
You can go there.
And if you want me, I am at themercuryrising.com. And on all social medias, I am the Mercury Rise. But yeah, thanks everyone, and happy Algoling.
Happy hunting.
Happy hunting is a better one. Okay.